The first time I heard this story, I thought it was a joke. Harold is at a steakhouse in Nashville. It's a Saturday night, his daughter's birthday. The table has 6 people: his wife, his daughter, her husband, 2 grandkids, the kind of dinner that costs $300 without anyone trying. The check comes. Harold's son-in-law reaches for it. Harold waves him off, "I've got it," and hands over his card without looking at the total. But then, before he puts his wallet away, he does something that makes his daughter laugh out loud. He pulls out a small notebook, the kind reporters used to carry, and writes something down. His son-in-law leans over. "What are you doing?" Harold caps the pen. "Tracking." His son-in-law looks at his wife. His wife shrugs. She's used to it. Here's what made that moment stay with me. Harold is 64 years old. He retired 19 months ago from a logistics company in Nashville, where he spent 28 years as an operations director. No inheritance, no equity event, a salary that peaked at $79,000 a year, a 401k he maxed out for the last 11 years of his career, and a house he paid off at 57. His net worth, $1.1 million. And he tracks every dollar he spends, not approximately, every dollar. I spent a long time trying to understand why. And what I found was this. Retirees who don't build this habit, even wealthy ones, even people with portfolios that look completely healthy, walk away from an average of $340,000 over a 20-year retirement. Not from bad investments, not from a market crash, from something quieter, something that never shows up on a quarterly statement until the damage is already done. I'm going to show you exactly what that is. 6 reasons, 1 number. And by the end of this video, the notebook is going to make complete sense. Stay with me. I didn't learn this in a classroom. I'm not a certified financial planner. I don't manage other people's money. What I do is study the behavior of people who built real wealth on ordinary incomes, and I pay attention to the habits that don't show up in the headlines. The headline version of retirement planning is always about accumulation. Save more, invest earlier, pick the right funds. And that advice isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. Because the phase that actually determines whether your money outlasts you isn't the saving phase. It's the spending phase. And the spending phase is where most of the interesting and most of the dangerous things happen. This channel exists for one reason: to show you the mechanics of how real retirement wealth works. Not the motivational version, not the fantasy version, the version with actual numbers, actual behavior, and actual consequences. If that's what you're here for, subscribe, because what I'm covering in the next few videos builds on itself, and you don't want to miss the next piece. Now back to Harold, and back to the question that's probably still sitting in the back of your mind. $1 million, a small notebook, a Saturday night steakhouse. Why? Let me be precise about what tracking actually is, because most people have the wrong picture in their head. Tracking is not budgeting. Budgeting is a forward-looking restriction system. You decide in advance how much you're allowed to spend in each category, and then you try not to exceed it. Budgeting has a psychological flavor of scarcity. It's the financial equivalent of a diet. Tracking is something different. Tracking is a backward-looking awareness system. You record what already happened, no restrictions, no permission required, just information. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Here's the paradox that stopped me cold when I first encountered the data. Retirees with investable assets above $750,000 are significantly more likely to track their spending than retirees with assets between $100,000 and $300,000. Read that again. The people who need it least by any conventional logic do it the most. The people who are objectively financially comfortable are the ones pulling out notebooks at dinner tables and writing things down while their families laugh at them. And the people who are most financially exposed, they're the ones who stopped. The most common reason people give for not tracking, "I don't need to anymore. I've earned the right to relax." That sentence, "I've earned the right to relax," is one of the most expensive sentences in American retirement. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 6 reasons why wealthy retirees track every dollar. Each one builds on the previous. And the 6th, the one I'm saving for last, is the one that almost nobody in personal finance talks about openly. That 6th reason is also the one most directly connected to the $340,000 figure I mentioned at the start. Let's go. The first reason made me rethink something I'd believed for years about what money actually measures. Harold doesn't track because he's worried about running out of money. He's not. His withdrawal rate is 3.2% annually, well inside the commonly cited 4% rule, which is the guideline suggesting that withdrawing no more than 4% of your portfolio per year gives you a high statistical probability of not outliving your money over a 30-year retirement at 3.2%. Harold has margin. He knows it. So why the notebook? He told me, or rather someone very much like him, told me that he tracks because of something he called the signal. Not the amount, the pattern. Here's what he meant. When you stop tracking, individual purchases don't feel significant. $18 for lunch doesn't feel significant. $22 for a streaming service you forgot you subscribed to doesn't feel significant. $63 on a bottle of wine for a Tuesday dinner doesn't feel significant. None of those numbers trigger an alarm. Not emotionally, not mathematically. But here's what Harold understands that most retirees don't. Those numbers compound. A $200 per month drift, which is what researchers who study retirement spending call the gradual, invisible upward creep of discretionary spending, produces $2,400 of unplanned annual outflow. Over 20 years, without accounting for any investment growth that money could have generated, that's $48,000. With a conservative 6% average annual return on what could have stayed invested, that same $200 monthly drift costs you closer to $92,000 over 20 years. Not because of any single bad decision, because of decisions that each felt perfectly reasonable in isolation. The notebook doesn't tell Harold whether he can afford lunch. It tells him whether his pattern is drifting. $200 a month, quietly, invisibly, over 20 years, $92,000. Gone, and nobody to blame, because every individual choice was defensible. But the second reason is the one that changed how I think about the word budget entirely. This one took me a while to see, because it's dressed up to look like discipline, but it's actually something deeper. Wealthy retirees don't budget. I want to be careful with that sentence because it sounds like I'm saying they spend without thinking. I'm not. What I mean is, the mental model they operate from is not a budget. It's something researchers in behavioral finance call a spending identity. Here's the difference. A budget is reactive. It activates when you're about to exceed a limit. It's a brake system. A spending identity is proactive. It defines in advance what kind of person you are based on what you choose to spend on, and just as importantly, what you choose not to spend on. It's not a brake, it's a compass. Harold doesn't have a category called dining out, limit $300 per month. What Harold has is a clear internal answer to the question, what does money mean to me at this stage of my life? For Harold, the answer is specific. Money means security for his wife if he dies first. It means 2 international trips per year. It means never asking his daughter for help. Everything else is noise. That clarity, that identity is what the tracking protects. Because without tracking, the identity erodes. Not dramatically, not with a single catastrophic decision. It erodes the way a coastline erodes, gradually, incrementally, in ways that only become visible after years have passed. The data on this is striking. Retirees who articulate a clear spending identity and maintain a tracking habit show, on average, a 17% higher portfolio value at age 80 compared to retirees with similar starting assets who do not track. On a $1 million starting portfolio, 17% is $170,000. $170,000. Not from better investments, from knowing who you are and building a simple system to protect it. The budget tells you when to stop. The spending identity tells you why you started. And tracking is the only tool that keeps the identity honest. But here's where it gets more complicated. Because everything I've just described assumes that your spending in retirement is stable. And it isn't. This one blindsides people. Not because it's hidden, it's actually well documented in retirement research. It blindsides people because nobody tells them to look for it before they retire. Most retirees and most pre-retirees think of retirement spending as roughly linear. You have your expenses, they go up a little with inflation, you plan for that, done. That model is wrong. Retirement spending moves in 3 distinct phases that researchers have been documenting since the 1980s, and each phase has a radically different spending profile. Phase 1 is called the go-go years, roughly ages 62 to 72 for most retirees. This is the high activity period: travel, hobbies, home projects, social spending. Costs in this phase are often higher than expected. Retirees frequently underestimate how much they'll spend when they suddenly have 40 free hours a week. Phase 2 is the slow-go years, roughly 72 to 82. Activity drops, travel becomes less frequent, discretionary spending decreases. Many retirees in this phase find themselves actually spending less than their planned withdrawal rate, which sounds like good news until you realize they're often underspending on healthcare and maintenance that will compound into larger costs later. Phase 3 is the no-go years, 82 and beyond. Activity is minimal, healthcare dominates. Long-term care costs, which is the umbrella term for in-home assistance, assisted living, or nursing care can run anywhere from $54,000 per year for basic in-home care to over $108,000 per year for full nursing home care. Here's the critical implication. A retiree who doesn't track is almost certainly misjudging which phase they're in and therefore misallocating their portfolio across all three. Overspending in the go-go years by just $400 per month, which is easy to do and feels completely justified, reduces the capital available for no-go year healthcare costs by nearly $96,000, assuming a 6% return over 20 years. Harold tracks precisely because he wants to see the phase transition before his bank account does. 3 phases, 3 completely different spending profiles, one tool that tells you which one you're actually in, not which one you plan to be in. And now we get to the reason I've been holding back since the beginning. The one that connects everything and the one that explains the $340,000 number in a way I don't think you're expecting. Here's what nobody tells you. The wealthiest retirees don't track because they're disciplined. They track because they're grieving. I know that sounds strange. Stay with me. When you retire, especially after a long, successful career, you lose something that most financial plans don't account for. You lose the automatic structure that your job provided. The calendar, the deadlines, the performance reviews, the feedback loop that told you on a daily basis whether you were doing well or falling behind. For 30, 35, 40 years, your work gave you a continuous stream of external signals about your competence, your value, your progress. And then, on a specific date, those signals stop. This isn't a small thing. Researchers who study retirement psychology have documented what they call identity disruption, the loss of the professional self that, for most high-achieving Americans, was the primary source of structure, purpose, and competence feedback. And here's the connection that took me years to see clearly. Tracking is a substitute structure. When Harold pulls out that notebook at a steakhouse on a Saturday night in front of his family, while his son-in-law stares, he is not auditing his portfolio. He is performing a deliberate act of agency. He is telling himself in concrete, numerical terms that he is still paying attention, still in control, still competent. The tracking gives him what the job used to give him automatically, a daily signal that he is doing well. Wealthy retirees understand this intuitively, even if they can't articulate it. Retirees who stop tracking often report not immediately, but within 6 to 18 months, a vague sense of drift, of losing the thread, of spending more than they intended without being able to point to any single decision that was clearly wrong. That drift is identity disruption expressing itself financially. Now, let's put the full number together. A retiree starting with $1 million at age 63. No tracking system, a modest $200 per month spending drift beginning in year 2, well within the range documented in retirement behavior research. Phase misjudgment leading to a $400 per month overspend during the go-go years. And the absence of a spending identity resulting in a 17% portfolio underperformance versus tracked peers by age 80. Run those 3 factors simultaneously over 20 years with a 6% average annual return. The difference between the tracked portfolio and the untracked portfolio, $342,000. $340,000. Not lost in a market crash. Not lost to fraud. Lost to drift. Lost to phase blindness. Lost to the slow, invisible erosion of a spending identity that nobody was watching. That is the cost of the notebook Harold didn't put down. So what did Harold actually do with all of this? Harold is 66 now. His portfolio is at $1.8 million up from $1.1 million at retirement, despite 3 years of withdrawals, because his withdrawal rate has stayed consistently below his portfolio's growth rate. He still carries the notebook. His daughter still laughs about it. His son-in-law stopped asking questions when he saw the numbers. Let me recap quickly what we covered, because these 6 reasons build on each other, and I want them to land together before you close this video. 1. Tracking isn't about whether you can afford something. It's about detecting drift before it compounds. $200 a month, invisibly, over 20 years, $92,000. 2. Wealthy retirees don't budget. They protect a spending identity, and tracking is the only tool that keeps that identity honest. The portfolio difference at $80,000, $100,000, and $70,000. 3. Retirement spending isn't linear. Go, slow go, no go. Tracking tells you which phase you're actually in before your portfolio tells you you've been wrong. 4. The three phases interact. Overspending in the go-go years doesn't just cost you go-go money. It costs you no-go healthcare capital compounded. 5. The real cost isn't any single factor. It's the combination. Drift plus phase blindness plus identity erosion over 20 years, $340,000. 6. The one I saved for last. The wealthiest retirees track because the tracking is a substitute for the structure the job used to provide. It's not discipline, it's identity preservation under loss. And that's why they'll never stop. Harold understood something that most people don't figure out until it's expensive. Retirement doesn't just change what you do with your time. It changes the system that was telling you whether you were doing well. The notebook at the dinner table doesn't replace the money. It replaces the signal. I want to hear from you. Right now, do you track your spending in retirement, or did you stop at some point and tell yourself you'd earned the right to relax? Tell me in the comments. No judgment. I'd genuinely like to know where most people watching this actually are.